This episode is brought to you by Perspective Space, a community gathering venue in Encinitas, California that fosters mindfulness, sustainability, creative expression, and connection. More about them later. Hello and welcome to In the Art Scene podcast, an art podcast that has it all. I'm your host, Galina Marquez, and I invite fascinating people to talk about their personal creative journeys, success stories, and inspiration. We talk about art business and marketing, how to find your creative voice, and all the new trends in the art world like NFT, AI, and such. Join me and my guest for today's conversation. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to In the Art Scene podcast. And in this season, we are venturing around San Diego County, which actually makes me very happy because I get to explore some very interesting aspects of our local art scene. And today I'm having, a special guest again, of course, every episode. Erin Page is a professional artist advisor and artist representative who's been working in some of the most famous and high-end art galleries here in San Diego for almost 15 years. She is on her own adventure now, working on some very interesting projects that are going to benefit our local artists. And I hope that if you guys are listening, you're not in San Diego, you might be interested in some of the ideas. And I think what Erin has to say will also be available online at some point. So with this, without further ado, Erin, please welcome and introduce yourself.
Thanks so much, Galina. It's so nice to be here with you today. I think you did a great job introducing me, but yes, I am a local, arts professional. So I've worked within the San Diego region in the arts capacity for the past 15 years. But starting prior to that, I grew up in the Midwest and my mom owned an art gallery. So I've been riding this wave with artists and galleries and the industry for a very long time now. And yes, my background is historically in working in galleries, so working on the sales line of it and representing artists. I left a gallery I was working with about 6 years ago, and I started working with an artist and helping be the studio representative for that artist. And that kind of opened up a whole nother component to the industry that I found really interesting, which led me to create my own business, then working with artists, using that information that I've gleaned from helping several different artists with their business practice, and bringing it more into like a business development project for artists. So that's kind of what I've been up to.
Yeah, and I'm actually very excited to talk to you about your experience today, because usually, like most of the time, I bring creatives on the podcast, and that's like the most inspiring conversations you can ever imagine. I mean, you work with artists every day, right? But I also like to explore and give the opportunity to our listeners, who are mostly artists, to see what's going on the business side of it, because I know that it's a frustrating topic for a lot of us, especially those of us who are emerging or in like getting close to the mid-level career, getting more or less confident with our own art practice, but not enough confident with, approaching the collectors or galleries, or, how to represent yourself online, how to create a professional website, how to, go into the business side of those things. And I really love when I have a chance to bring someone who has a very close look and a lot of experience from that side, so we can share that information with everybody who's listening. So, and I the last time we spoke, I wanted to make a comment, but I didn't. But and I want to make it right now, because I really love your background. I mean, this is clearly, I mean, you have such a taste for art, because I see some very interesting kind of 3D display on your wall, and is it like I thought it's a Harry Potter kind of like hanging
yes,
candles from the ceiling.
I'm at home today, and my daughter is really into Harry Potter right now. So we had these for Halloween, but I guess they're staying for Christmas. So
They
lesson
look
learned,
amazing.
lesson learned, anyone. But yes, being in the art industry, you can't help but become a collector. So my entire house has art like all over
Oh,
every wall.
amazing.
So I run out of walls. I give art away as gifts. So it's addictive. It's a
Yes,
great thing.
I
It's a
know.
great passion to have. And to that point, I really love supporting creatives. I think it's so unique. If I can just touch on this briefly, that one of the things I really respect and admire about artists, I'm not an artist. I work on the business side of it, so I come in with a different approach. But to create something that came from your brain, from your hand, from your ideas and concepts, that it's so engaging, beautiful, whatever, that someone wants to take their money and purchase it is just such a wonderful blessing that you all have. That I'm not a creative, so in different ways in my business, perhaps, but not in that regard. So I just really want to applaud all artists for taking and being brave enough to do that, and really recognize that that's a real strength. So keep it up.
Well, it's a great word of encouragement to everybody. So I actually wanted to kind of start from the very beginning. You mentioned that your mom owned a gallery, so you were kind of in that business from an early age. But was that a primary influence for you to start working in this business, or was there a different story? How did you start working at the galleries and becoming a representative?
Sure. So when I started working with the gallery, my mom had a gallery when I was young. Like, she started as actually as an accountant. She was hired in from a gallery because her background was in accounting, and but she would bring me to work with her. And it was this beautiful, historic mansion in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, where I'm from. And the gallery represented like Milton Avery. So I would just run around these beautiful salons with, wonderful artists, and just to have this like mansion to myself. And it became kind of just this playground for me. And I guess I was so young that I didn't really know one way or the other that this was different. But my mom then, from that gallery, decided to open her own gallery. And she had a successful business in Milwaukee for several years. I had thoughts about, taking over the family business, because that's what you're supposed to do. I was studying art history in college, but it wasn't really yet, formalized. I was still young. And when I moved out to California, I really had no idea what I was doing at that point. But I find myself down at Balboa Park often. I lived over in that area, and I was in Domingue one day, and I was looking at this beautiful exhibition of Chinese hat boxes, and I still remember it because it just hit me. I'm like, this is what you're meant to do. You are meant to work in art. This is the path to follow. And from there, things just opened up, as things do. So a friend of mine had worked at a gallery. They were looking for someone, and I was hired on the spot. And, that's just kind of how it started here locally. But from that, it's rolled into many different things. And it's been a great journey.
How did you end up in San Diego? Because thinking that if you meant to work in the art world, I would think that the logical place would be like going from Milwaukee to, let's say, New York, or at least Los Angeles if you wanted to be in California. How did you end up in San Diego?
At that age, I think I was just driven by the weather, because it's not great in Milwaukee, and 9 months of gray. And like, honestly, as a person that appreciates aesthetics, that was so heavy, just that living in that world for so many years. And then when I came to visit San Diego, I was just amazed by the beauty and the weather, and that this is possible. In February, you could have 70 degrees, that's unheard of. So that was kind of the impetus for it. I wasn't really thinking about being in the arts. Now, at this point, I recognize that San Diego has its challenges with the arts. We're not a booming art scene. I think, I've heard other guests, discuss this, but there's not a lack of an economy for artists. It's just that there's no established major art centers, galleries, things like that. It's a very small market. So hopefully that's something that will change in the near future. But I feel committed to San Diego, my home now for 20 years. And I think it would be a disservice to move away and go to a different city. Like, people need to be here to support the local community, and I'm one of them. So I'm not going anywhere, folks.
Well, thank you for that. All right. Let's talk a little bit about your experience working at the galleries. So,
Sure.
San Diego, yeah, it's not as established as, let's say, New York or even Los Angeles, but we have no shortage of different types of galleries, and we have an incredible, vibrant art scene in San Diego. And the galleries go from, small kind of mom and pop shops or collectives to pretty fancy places. And
Sure.
like you said, that we have some residents in San Diego County that are equipped to buy some very fancy,
Sure.
expensive art.
Yeah.
So let's talk about that. What kind of galleries did you work at? What's your experience with the local collectors or local artists, and how many of them were actually local? So
Yeah. These are all great questions. So I worked in contemporary art galleries. So, focusing on, more of that genre versus like, landscapes or historic paintings. Um, and, one gallery I worked with, I would say that their focus was more not on local artists. So that, in fact, was a little more of a disconnect from the local arts community and, in fact, from local collectors, focusing more on, tourists and, folks coming in with like second or third homes. The other gallery I worked with, they were more focused on supporting the local artist community. So I had a bigger connection there, and therefore a lot more local collectors, which is good to, as an artist to know that your local galleries want to collect local artists, So, and then there's a lot to be said about like, the advantages of like for both parties, like shipping and all that kind of stuff. But I think, it's really nice to see within San Diego, if we're talking about collector base, like some areas, opening up, perhaps like I've noticed like a lot happening up now in Solana Beach and Cedros. It's a little more design oriented, but that is still an avenue for artists. And again, any way that artists can get their work shown and there's places for visibility, that's what we need. So, yeah, that's kind of my experience with the galleries here.
well, let's dive in more like a business
Sure.
side of the art world, because that's what you are bringing to the table when you're working with an artist, whether in the gallery setting or as a independent representative. So what do you see? So first of all, um, what is included in the business side of the art business? Because we as artists all understand that you have to have your practice, you have to have your studio, you have to figure out what supplies, when, how, create your own schedules, make time and make place to get inspired or do your research, et cetera, et cetera. So there's a lot on that side. And then there is a lot of ramble about how you do your social media, what do you do online. And I see like the marketing, I know marketing from my firsthand experience, because I've been in marketing for 18 years, and that's a full-time job. Even if you're
Mm-hmm.
trying to market just one person yourself, right? You either have to have a lot of help or you just need to focus on it online. So dividing time between that and doing marketing, let alone figuring out what's best in that area. But marketing is also just a part of the art business. There's a lot in it that, like, I personally don't know. I can guess, like handling shipping, gallery applications and stuff. So you see more of a whole picture, what comes into the business side of the art business. Can you just give us a little bit of overview so the artist
Sure.
would understand what we're dealing with?
Sure. And, that's a good question because, the truth is that, and, one of the reasons I started my business was I saw a lot of the problems that artists were facing with presenting themselves, with understanding how business is properly conducted so that they could be successful. And, people would come submit to the gallery, and I wasn't turned up. I wanted to help them. I wanted to say, you're in your own way in this regard. And the truth is, a lot of artists don't have a resource to kind of help guide them. This isn't something that's taught in school. There's not a ton of folks like me. There's seemingly more like artist coaches nowadays, where I really help, like, as a consultant, like, let's grind down into the business and talk about where we can improve and how we can present you better. How can I help you understand how this whole system works at a more elevated level, right? So, when I do like one-off consultations with artists often, and most of the time those conversations are, we do like a deep dive into looking at the work, at the website, how they're pricing, what they're using to create the work. A lot of artists surprisingly aren't using like the best products for their work, and so that could be a real turnoff to some collectors. So we just kind of do that whole kind of full, like, let's really look at the work, and I then suggest areas of improvement. Surprisingly, it's like 99% of the time artists have issues with websites, photography, and pricing. Like, these are common things, not to mention like artist statements, or how we talk about the work. There's entire courses for like writing artist statements, but it's, that is really like that elevator pitch about how you speak about your work, why it's important, where you're going with it. Like, really that conceptual development of the work is a really big component as well. And I really love helping artists develop the work, and letting them get like more connected with it, because it's really easy these days to say you make something because you like making it, but there's got to be something more to it, really, because there's too many artists out there now that the more connected you are to your work, the more you really truly put yourself into it, the greater chances are of success, I think, personally. So I know I want that from the artists that I collect. So, and I hear that from, collectors that I still work with. So that's kind of that component of it, and this leading into more, I know we're going to talk about this, but the workshop that I'm putting together, this is like one of the things I hope to kind of present all these keystone, brass tacks moments that artists need, so that they really feel like at least they've gotten some information somewhere, at least they have questions about, like, answered. That I'm sure there's always something that comes up that I'm an easy resource for those things.
Yeah, we'll get to your workshop in a little bit, but I wanted to ask you. So you just mentioned artist statement, and I want to ask you, what's the significance of the artist statement? How many people are actually paying attention to it, and what's like for the artists like myself, let's say, right? I don't really have, the set subject, or I'm experimenting with different styles. And I know a lot of artists are concerned that if you are kind of getting into one style and you start marketing yourself, and that's what people know you for, you kind of start a little bit selling yourself, and sometimes you just want to pivot and you want to shift and you want to experiment and do something else. Like, do you need an artist statement for every single pivot of your work, or for every collection that you put out? Or if you are just kind of like artist of all genres, you have to kind of craft the artist statement for all of it, that's like all encompassing? Because there are some artists like that, and they're successful. But I personally struggle with my art statement. So
Oh, okay. I think the thing is, every artist there's an inspiration point there, right? There's, like, if we're talking about music, there's a chord running through all the work. So while you might be interested in, like, say, the sculpture or painting, there's some connection point between those two. And what is that? Where is that interest point? So, your artist statement really is, what you make, why you make it, why it's important, and what you hope the audience receives from looking at it. So these are just, basic, elements, but when you put it together, it's like your elevator pitch. Again, I mentioned this earlier, but, we all have it, right? It's like what we do for people. So if you can't come up with those little 4 words, how can you expect other people to really connect with the work, right? So I think an artist statement is very important. I also think your, like, artist little bio brief, I call it a bio brief, is important. So, like, that, and I know personally, like, from a gallery standpoint, they're required. You have to have the artist statement is a nice little bonus, but that bio brief has to be dialed in. And there's higher up galleries, sure, where they have a staff writer that might help you be able to pull this apart. But at the emerging level, these are things that need to be developed within the studio. So And I think really as you bear down with them and you get, real intimate with that writing, it's such a good practice for yourself to connect with your work deeper and therefore be able to speak about your work deeper, like with people more comfortably. And yeah, it's a really good practice to just engage in, but it is important. So
I love
if you
the
need help,
way.
let me know.
Okay. I love the way you're talking about it, that it's actually, it needs to be deeply connected with how you feel and how you see your own work. So, and it's sort of like the psychological exercise for yourself as an artist to be able to
Yes.
talk about your. So I really love the way you're putting it out, because like for me, looking outside in the galleries, and when I see the how the exhibitions are put together and the statements and everything, and probably having a marketing background, I look at the artist statements and think like, well, is it just been put together for marketing purposes? So how often it is that it is actually true that some statements in some exhibitions or at some galleries, that's purely for some sort of a fancy words, kind of like a marketing thing,
Mm-hmm.
or is it actually most of the galleries care about what artist has to say and what artist feels and how to put it into words?
I can't speak for everyone. My experience and my interest point is that it's really important because, again, there's just too many artists nowadays, right? Everyone can be an artist in some way, and connection is so important, right? So if we're talking about like super conceptual art, and it's let's say that it's supposed to be devoid of any explanation. That's something perhaps different, but I think when you imagine like when you walk into a museum and there's some like text on the wall and it helps you understand what you're looking at better, right? And there's other artists or people that will argue that I shouldn't have to explain it to you. It should be an experiential thing, what you take out of it. But I really think 99% of people will help connect better to the work if there's some guidelines here and some idea and understanding. So personally, I really think it's important, especially to, on a business level, if you're going to go apply for calls for entry or whatever, artist statements are required. So these are things you should have in your toolbox, and, make sure that you can, communicate those properly with folks that are interested in hearing more about them.
And I agree with you. Yeah, I agree with you that if I have something like some context, like not necessarily very detailed context, but if some context is attached to the work, it helps me personally connect with the work better, and that's probably the reason why another reason why I do the podcast, because it really, like, if I look at artists' work and I just love it and I want to bring them on the podcast, there I just get to uncover so many different things. So it's like a 1 hour long artist statement, if you will.
Sure, exactly. And to that point, it's really surprising. Like, I've worked with artists before who are like, I don't know, I just make this because I like to make. And I'm like, that's not true. There's something there. And together we've worked out some really deep, interest points, and really like helped the artist maybe think deeper about their work, which they didn't even know they were making it because of these things. And we're not driving concepts or being like trying to sell a concept. There really is a reason why you're interested in making the work you're interested in, whether you know it or not. And it's about extracting that and then putting into a nice little statement that other people can kind of connect with and understand.
I can see how many artists would need help with that.
Sure. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I really love the way you're talking about it, why it is important. So what other basics go into the art business that artists might not necessarily have tools for?
So again, oftentimes it's websites and pricing. So I think, I talk a lot about pricing because I think artists aren't familiar with what's too much, what's too little, what's expected. You know, do I discount? Do I charge for extra for commissions? All that kind of stuff. So those are some really important foundational things that I think people need to know. And I personally like to use the square inch method of pricing. So I worked on a kind of a tier formula with my clients, and we figure out what's appropriate for their work. And, then we come up with I like a nice price sheet because I think it's also a nice tool to have handy and then also use, with your gallery partners or whomever that you need to share it with. So it becomes a really nice, just let's get that off the plate resource. Websites is another big one. I think a lot of artists, they struggle with how to put together a proper presentation. My suggestion always is look at other artists' websites. That's the number one. Look at people that, you enjoy, things to include your about, your CV, your exhibition history. If you have video, if you have some really great, perhaps depending on who your, ideal client is, install shots from perhaps where your work has lived in homes. I'm not so keen on those rendering drop-ins because I think a lot of times they look a little cold and obviously rendered. So more real photos than not, if possible. Instagram obviously comes up a lot because really in our industry, that's the social media that's being used mainly by artists and, other arts professionals. I'm not sure how many collectors are digging through it, but I know it's a way to communicate with the art world itself. And then photography is a big one. I cannot hammer home enough the importance of strong photography, especially in today's market where people are so comfortable buying online now that it used to be just one image of the work. And now you really need 4 to 5 images of the piece. And it has to be good images, not just phone shots and stuff like that. So, work through those kind of things, because for me, it's always about how do you present yourself to the best of your capacity? How can we together make you look the strongest so that you don't get dismissed, so that eyes do find your work and that you feel really strong about your presentation and your brand, whatever we like to call it. But, it's all those things, bringing it together into a really nice, easy, appealing method of presenting yourself.
Let me tell you about the new friends and sponsors of the show, Perspective Space. Perspective Space is a unique venue in the heart of Encinitas, California, open for individuals and companies that promote mindfulness, creativity, sustainability, and connection through their practice. The space is open and bright and well suited for art shows, yoga, photo shoots, sound healing, art classes, workshops, and other community gatherings of up to 60 people at a time. Perspective Space is a project by Think Parallax, a local sustainability strategy and communications agency that generously opened up its office for the local art community during the pandemic. I interviewed the CEO, Jonathan Hanwood, in Season 8, Episode 6, and I'm dedicating several episodes in this season to feature their artists and residents. To learn more, go to perspectivespace.com or click the banner on intheartscene.com. It's perspectivespace.com or click the banner on intheartscene.com. Well, I have an interesting question for you right now.
Sure.
So you were talking about the nice presentation. You actually mentioned that Instagram is more of the channel to communicate with the art world itself. And by talking to other artists and actually doing it myself, I know that the more content you put out there, whether on your website or on social media, you are more likely to attract other artists. And that has been one of the questions that was coming up over and over and over again with the artists on the podcast and whoever I was discussing the marketing issues with. How do you actually attract collectors? How do you where do you need to be, first of all? What kind of messages? How, your presentation is nice, but how do you make it appealing for collectors? Because ultimately, if you want to sell your work, that's who you need to attract. But more often than not, we're just attracting other artists, which is not bad. I mean, other artists are also collectors, but it's not necessarily, that's the easy group to target.
Yeah.
those other collectors are not easy to target. So, so can you talk a little bit about how to make sure that what you do and what you're putting out and where you present yourself is actually targeting that group of collectors?
Sure. And so I'm not a social media expert by any means, but I've done some very basic
Not
research
necessarily,
into.
not necessarily online, just overall.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think one of the things is that you've got to go where collectors go. So the truth is, our fancy art collectors who don't know much about the industry looking at artists on Instagram, probably not really, because they're using Instagram like Facebook, like family photos and kids soccer practice. So they don't really even utilize it as a tool to perhaps find artists, right? It's more of the art industry professionals. Like you might find designers on there, art advisors, consultants, gallerists, items of that nature. Like, so it definitely is something that needs to be maintained. But if we're really looking at it, and I'm not saying there's no collectors on Instagram, of course there's artists who are selling off Instagram. But in my experience with the artists I work with, it's they're not really selling off Instagram. It's more that visibility within the art world that's important. For artists, I think if I can, and this might be a little obtuse way of getting to your question, but it's really important to be a member of your art community. Like, I can't stress this enough. I know artists sometimes are introverts. They don't want to go out. They don't want to engage. The more you go to events, the more you go be seen, the more you visit the local, museum, you're engaging with other people interested in arts. Most of the time, those people are not artists. They're other people who perhaps are interested in meeting artists and collecting art. So it's more about going to the gallery shows, making a name for yourself, and I'm not saying like promote yourself endlessly, like really genuinely connect with your local art community. You'd be surprised how much attention that could bring and open up opportunities for visibility. Whether you're invited to a show, you get a studio visit, maybe a gallery decides they want to sign you eventually. But that's really where the collectors are out and about. They're looking at art, and they're going to the museums and they're going to shows and they're going to events. And that's where you have to engage with them, really, and again, direct interaction is a lot better than just online.
And if we're talking about online?
We're talking about online. There's a lot of different sites now where artists can, if you don't have gallery representation, like you can put your work up. Like I know there's like Saatchi Art. I'm not saying it's the best platform, but there are things like, the Other Fair or these online galleries that do take, a lot of emerging artists. And I'm not like an expert in all those either, but I think they're out there now. Like there's a lot of different venues for artists to show work now, especially with after COVID, how much moved on to the actual online forums. But just do your research, I think, for artists is like, if you find, one of these online galleries that's going to represent you, really do your research and find out what that looks like and how that kind of breaks down with like commission fees and shipping and stuff like that. But, the traditional gallery model, there's more galleries closing than there are opening these days. So things are shifting in this industry, and there's ways about it to find other avenues of getting visibility.
Yeah, I also have a question that is kind of on the edge between what you're talking about and my experience working in marketing. Like, for example, if you put together a nicely looking website, to make the website be visible, indexed on search platforms, you constantly have to update it. You need to put the new content in there. And again, as artists, we like what kind of content we can put in there. We can put the content about like our own inspiration, what we do, the process, that kind of stuff. And again, it will be picked up by Google, but it probably will show it to other artists who are looking exactly for those things, like, the artist process, because I assume that collectors are not looking at it, right? So do you think that the website should be more of like online business cards, kind of a reference point that artists can share with a potential collector, where they can go and look at the images and see what's available and read about, their bio and CV and other things, or it's a reference point for the gallery as well? Or it actually needs to be the tool that is attracting potential collectors online? And if it is, what what recommendations would you give to artists about how to maintain their websites?
Sure. So I think that the websites are really important because it is your online portfolio of your work, right? It's a really beautiful presentation of who you are. It's more comprehensive than what I can find on Instagram. Um, and I know a lot of artists, like sometimes I'm actually shocked when they don't have a website because as an arts professional, as an art advisor, I want to go to a website and see that this is the real deal and how do you look, right? And I feel like I get more information from that. I know that's where galleries look, art advisors, consultants, they're looking there. So it is important. And I'm sure there's private collectors. Maintaining like SEO practices on your website, that's a little more challenging. And I think for any, business really it is, but, if that's what we're talking about, like how do you update your website constantly with information? The common thing is to do a blog and that's like, but that can be a little cumbersome too, but, and then what is it that you're writing about? You really need to consider when you do write a blog, what does your audience want to know and how does reading that blog benefit the audience? So, it has to be less like perhaps self-serving and more about audience focused, which, perhaps might not be the best, thing for an artist to spend their time on. But with that said, I think, don't dismiss the importance of the website. It's really, really important. And what was the follow-up to that? You had asked a question about.
Yeah. So is the website more a reference point for that you can send to your collectors or to the galleries to see how you present yourself, or it's actually an online tool that needs to attract more collectors and galleries?
So I think that's it's more about the portfolio, and then it is like this. SEO, trying to drive revenue and sales. If you are an artist that sells primarily through your website, then you might want to think about, having a shop and updating it regularly and that kind of stuff, which is another opportunity to kind of keep, in front of in Google search platform and console, like recognizing your platform. So, there are elements like that you can definitely strive for.
Right. Well, that is interesting because that, like to me personally, that's exactly the opposite of what I do in my marketing practice. Listen, I'm all about inbound. You need to figure out what your target audience is thinking. You need to write about this a lot. But I totally get it. So kind of bringing it like boiling it down to a few points. The most important thing for the artists is kind of do their own networking in the local art scene, be where people are looking at the artworks, whether it's museums or other galleries, or so where you actually see people interacting with the artwork who are not artists, right? So that's probably the key point. And then having their materials and tools just kind of presentation ready, right? Because you can't put you can't just have like a booklet that you're carrying with you and giving it away to people. It's easier to have a website and just put it on the business card, where people actually can look at your work and your statement and your bio and whatever else you feel like is important to show to other people who might be interested in your work. So, okay, well, that's actually a valuable point, because that, for me personally, that has been a challenge to figure out, because like, okay, I can probably understand any other vertical in terms of marketing, but not the not the art world, because it operates completely differently from everything I have experienced in back in my corporate career. So I have a question, and it's kind of a segue to your workshop that you're working on. So there are so many different things available for artists right now in terms of the education and online workshops, and I keep seeing it, and I'm personally a very skeptical person. And when I see aggressive marketing of something that is promising a lot and in like a very almost instant like time frame, like you're gonna be successful, you're gonna sell like your collection for $30,000 in 3 days if you watch my workshop, etc., etc. And I feel personally that there are so many predators who are taking advantage of artists just because it is very obvious that artists are not business savvy. Not all artists. I'm generalizing, obviously, but a lot of us, especially at the beginning of our careers, we're not business savvy. So we are, grasping toward whatever can help us, and the less amount of work we need to do for that, and the less amount of money, and the less amount of time we're going to spend, the better. Like, so yes, I will invest in this one workshop like right now, but then it kind of is going to launch me, right? Because we kind of want that part of our business to be still on the backside, because what's important for us is to continue creating. And it is frustrating for a lot of artists to realize that if you are doing something yourself, if you don't have resources to invest in the art representative, advisor, agent, whatever, you're going to have to do a lot of work, a lot of administrative work, a lot of marketing. All of that falls onto your own shoulders. So there are lots of seemingly predatory things going on in the art world in terms of online education and stuff. So what's your opinion, and what can, like, I want, first of all, artists who are listening to the podcast be knowledgeable about where to put their precious dollars and their precious hours into. So how not to get what are the things they need to watch for not to get scammed, or to kind of realize if that's going to be helpful and valuable for them, and it's indeed worth it or not. And then we will pivot to what you're doing.
And I mean, that's a really good point though, because like I feel like because of what I do, my Instagram feed is constantly like popping up with some new person offering some workshop, or some online, enroll in my course, and it's like $1,500, and I'm just shocked because, I don't know what their background is. I don't, some of these folks look real young, and I don't know what their experiences are, but and there's other ones too where they come from. I mean, perhaps the intentions are good because they do recognize a gap in the industry, but they don't come from an art background, right? So I think, for artists, it's, if you're going to invest in, any kind of sense of business development, we all need it. Like I have marketing people that I work with. I have worked with a business coach. We invest in our business. That's part of life, right? But make sure that it's someone that's, reputable, that you respect, that has a real understanding background, the real people that are interested in talking with you and helping you. It's a relationship. They have to understand your, practice and who you are and your strengths and weaknesses, all that stuff. And most of them will give you a brief consultation to kind of get to know you on the phone and see, if it's a fit and if it's an alignment, or if I've had plenty of conversations with artists where I don't just dismiss them. I'll get on the phone and say, listen, I don't want to just take your money because you're just not right there yet. And I'm happy to, help you get there, but I just, want to make it clear that I think you have some other work to do. Here's some things, and then we'll circle back when you feel like you're in a better place. And I think that's the real honest truth, is that the real ones here in this industry are here to help you, and we're not here just to take your money. No one's getting rich off artists. Like, let's be honest. So, to that point, I think artists really there's got to be an understanding that as a business, in the sense of you're an artist, there are things that you're going to have to do that are outside of making the art, and that is, being organized, having your database updated, pricing and communications and things like that, until you can eventually branch out into getting help. But it is good that, there's resources like myself, and there's a couple other folks that I admire that can give you the guidelines for that, so that you feel that you have some capacity to understand how it's done. versus just winging it and making mistakes, and, small investments, maybe you do it annually, maybe you do it every few months and you reach out to someone, but it doesn't have to be overwhelming in a sense. Like there are people that are here to help and support that aren't going to break the bank.
Yes, and now that's a great segue to.
I was like, that's a good segue.
That's a good. Well, I actually appreciate what you said, that the real people there are not to just take your money.
Mm-hmm.
And I think this is important for a lot of artists to understand, that people who are working in the art advisory and in the galleries, they will be successful when the artist is successful.
Correct.
Right? So like the more you grow, the more their business grows.
Exactly. And, some people I've heard, I just recently saw a post and it was an artist, and he was complaining about the galleries and saying that they're a predatory system. And I'm not saying that every gallery is 100% squeaky clean, but let me tell you from the front lines, it is not an easy job. And then there's so much overhead that goes into operating a gallery. And, it should be an equal investment that the galleries, putting you out there, promoting your work in front of collectors and believing in your work. Right. And that's why they're earning the commission they do. And then, 75% is going towards the overhead of that gallery. So, I think that's a good point, that it's not as, predatory as folks make it out to be. Now, there's people all over this industry that are doing weird stuff and charging them exorbitant, commissions and things like that. But you just have to be, you always be, savvy enough to like question. Right.
Yeah.
So.
Well, we're talking about the galleries that are representing individual artists, right? So the gallery is taking you under your wing, and that's what they really invest in you. So you are one of very few that they represent. But I think there are, at least in San Diego, there are more galleries that are putting up open calls. So they're charging for the application, and there is a jury system that doesn't guarantee that your work is going to be in the show, and the application fee is non-refundable. And then if your work is sold, you're still paying that 50% commission. So I think that is what a lot of artists are referring to, because it's kind of a more common, especially for the emerging artists. It's easier to pay like $35-$40 for the open call application, and then see what happens, right? And there's a lot of chance, because those shows usually don't sell out, right? They are it's a very temporary kind of a thing. It hangs there for a month, maybe 2 months. They have a reception where like a lot of people are invited, and then it's kind of like, what's the foot traffic in that gallery, right? What's the chance that your work is actually going to be seen by many people and be sold at that gallery? So you're still investing that $35-$40. And even if you get in the show, there's no guarantee that your work is going to be sold. And if it is going to be sold, you're still paying your 50% commission. So that is kind of like that's challenging for artists. And that's like it's a majority. It's a big population of artists who are like up to their mid-level career, because that feels like you have to pay for every step that you are making, with no guarantee of any results. And those galleries, like there's a lot of kind of information going on, like, oh, see who's the juror, and see what kind of art they make, or what kind of art they represent, if they are the gallery professionals. So see if your work fits in that category. It's like, but that's really not fair, right? And it also not representational, because it doesn't mean that person makes one style of the art but doesn't appreciate the other style, right? There's no information about how to prepare your work properly, except for the hanging hardware on the back, like what what is going to look like, because gallery has a certain equipment for hanging, and you need to make sure that your work is it has D-rings and wire and other stuff, right?
Mm-hmm.
So there's not, it's kind of like it's a blind shot every single time. It's a blind shot. And also, if you are a very new kind of artist, like I feel like it's easier to get in the show, in the group show, if you have shown in that gallery before, or you have taken like a class from that gallery, or someone. If you are absolutely new in the area and you don't know anyone, and you just want to start doing something, there might be like a dozen of different calls that you apply and you don't get into, and like a dozen calls, $40 each. It's it's a pretty penny.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, that is what frustrating for a lot of artists at the beginning of their career, because you still have to invest, but you are investing kind of like not knowing whether you're doing something right, if there is a way to do it better, if there is like a more sure way of getting in the show, or presenting yourself to the gallery, or finding collectors, or doing something. You're kind of you're like a blind kitten, like just wandering around.
No, and you're right. You're right at that. Absolutely. And that is, I'm always shocked too by those fees, like the $35, $45. I don't understand that one. My concern with, and I'll say this, my concern with those types of shows is that I really think, how can anyone ever sell your work if they don't know who you are and what you're about? You're just one of 25 people in a show. So I think if you go that route, and I understand that at the beginning you have to do what you have to do, try as much as possible to connect with, like, to write a personal email thanking the juror for putting you in the show, writing why you feel excited about this opportunity, and just kind of stressing how, the importance of your work, like and I'm not saying be grandiose, but like, my work is about such and such, and I think that'll resonate with the audience. And I really use this material because of this. Like, if you can feed it, from your mouth to their ears, they're more likely to really take it in than they were just to get, one of the 25 applicants and read through that, that brief artist statement real quick, So again, it goes back to like when I mentioned earlier, like it cannot be understated how important connection is, and how forging those relationships are with the, people who are doing these things. I do think, for artists, I really try to stress, if it's possible, can you try and find the free calls for entry, the ones that are, I know there's like even like coffee shops and stuff where you don't have to pay for those fees, but you're going to have visibility. I know it's not an ideal showcase for your work, but again, it's starting somewhere and it's free. So how can you find those opportunities? And perhaps there's a commission to the place, like a, suggested donation or something. But if that's better than giving 50-50 to someone that doesn't know your work and is charging you to, pay to play things, like these vanity type galleries.
So let's now finally talk about what you're offering to us, because I know that you're putting together some comprehensive workshop, and it's not like 2-hour workshop. I've seen the write up, and it's like 10 weeks. It's a pretty.
Oh, sorry. It's supposed to be 2 hours.
2 hours, okay.
Okay,
so that is some different thing that you sent me.
Okay, well, it's written like that because so we'll back it up here. So I luckily have a great friend in the artist community here in San Diego, Jay Bell, who you've interviewed before, and he runs a nonprofit called Campana Studios out of like the North County, Carlsbad, and Encinitas region. And him and I have been talking about, how I've wanted to do, part of my business I've wanted to expand is that I do so many of these like one-off calls with artists that, I could just do a workshop and give so many of these people this information. And Jay's nonprofit is generous enough to support that. So it's a free workshop for artists. It's supposed to be 2 hours with 10 weeks of information.
I was so surprised. Like, wow, I thought it was going to be like a short workshop, and because it's free. I was like, wow, 10 weeks. I'm like, sign me up.
Jay and I, our discussions have been that, can we take this and make this a more regular occurrence? So it's happening, every few weeks. And so, as much as we can expand throughout the artist community and in different parts of town. I know San Diego is very, spread out, and this first workshop's going to be up at the Carlsbad Library. And so, that might not be really accessible for someone that's living in like say the South Bay. So, there are aspirations to make this more accessible, but at the moment that's kind of where it's starting out. But, it's, so yeah, again, it's going to be free for artists. It's, I'm capping it out at 30 folks so that I can, really make it a little as intimate as possible, but, going over it, and then I'm making sure that I have direct communication with those that sign up so that I know what it is that you want to make sure we cover so that I don't miss anything. But it's a pretty comprehensive, as you saw, outline of what we're going to talk about. But it's nothing that I don't get asked regularly within the course of the consultations that I give artists right now. So it's all things that I've, spoken about. I have, background information, and then I feel that it really helps support artists and their practice. And I want them to leave feeling empowered, that they heard it somewhere, that they have gained some insight of how this is all done and how they can, perhaps level up their business practice, which is what I get commonly asked is like, how do I level up?
All right. So those are, so the workshop is based on the frequently asked questions that you are getting on your one-on-one consultations.
Yes.
All right.
Kind of some of those topics that we're discussing.
Okay, so the first workshop is in Carlsbad, and it's launching in January. Do you have a date yet?
It is. It's on January 13th. Let me just
January 13th.
Real quick. I'm not sure if anyone listening is familiar, but there's a room off at the Carlsbad Library called the Gollin Room. So it's going to be January 13th. It's a Saturday from 10 a.m. to 12 p.m.
Okay. That's great. So I will make sure to put this information in the show notes. It's going to be up on your website as well.
I need to get up on my website, and for all that you don't know, Galina did a wonderful little branding thing for me here. So I have a wonderful graphic to announce this. So that'll get up on the website. But I'm just asking that artists, RSVP with me through my email, which is on my website. So my website is pageartprojects.com, and the information will be there. And then again, I want to connect with everyone prior so that so I know what your work is about and like how this can best serve you, and hopefully we can, get it checked off, and it's worth it for the 2 hours that you spend with me. So
January 13th, how much time are you putting into connecting with everybody who's RSVPing to your workshop? And I'm asking because I want to put this episode out well in advance. So actually people who are listening to it have a chance to still grab a spot and connect with you and have that kind of preliminary, one-on-one with you before the workshop.
Sure. So, right now I just have a few folks that have signed up, so there's plenty of space left for the event. And again, just email me, and then I just want to have like a brief exchange, like, if it's a fit for you, like, is it worth your time coming? I'm sure it is if you're reaching out, but also like, what's your work about? Like, I would love to see your website, and just maybe, some key questions that you're hoping that will be discussed, and I can, give you my little pitch back of what we're going to cover. So, hopefully that, everyone feels that that there's more to it than just like showing up and like doing a drop in and all that kind of stuff.
All right. Well, I'll make sure that I put this episode up by the middle of December, so people still have some time before the holidays and after the holidays to connect with you. Perfect. And also, it probably will be up on Campana Studios website, which I happen to manage.
Oh, perfect.
Yes. And I will make sure to put it up on my new online platform, SanDiegoArtDirectory.com. So if you guys are not signed up yet, that's a fairly new endeavor of mine. Please go and sign up for at least an email list, because I'm sending out weekly emails, and there will be information about Erin's workshop, probably even before this episode goes live. So to not miss any other things that are happening on in San Diego art scene, just sign up. Just sign up. I'm just saying, it's, I'm not going to clutter your mailbox, and it's free for everybody to use. So Alrighty. So, and you said that you are planning on making it a regular thing. So, if you guys are not making it to this workshop, make sure that you are staying up to date with Erin's website, Campana Studios website, and San Diego Art Directory, and you will have a chance to get a spot on the future workshops.
Exactly. Perfect.
Awesome. All right. So you spelled out your website. We will make sure that everything, all the information is in the show notes. We will make sure that this episode is up, well in advance before the workshop, so people still have a chance to sign up. And now it's a great time to plug anything else in if you want to.
You did a great job, Galina, by the way. And for all your listeners, the San Diego Art Directory that Galina's put together is quite a tremendous feat and accomplishment, and it's such a good resource for this community. So I really commend you for putting that together, and thank you, because it takes all of us putting this together, making it more accessible for artists here. But also for artists that, yes, again, as you mentioned, if you missed the workshop, please, reach out to me and I can keep you updated on future workshops. And maybe you want to sign up, you want to contact me for a consultation. So that's something we can discuss as well, and we can work one-on-one. So that's what I got for you.
Awesome. Well, if you want to put your email address in the show notes, please let me know and I'll do that. Otherwise, Perfect. I will just direct people to your website.
Okay.
All right. Well, thank you so much. Thank you so much for taking the time. And it's a pleasure to talk to you. And I am really happy to see now that I am more engaged with our local art scene, promoting this San Diego Art Directory, going and meeting so many amazing people. And that's part of the reason why this season is mostly about our local art scene and our local artists and people and professionals and all of the above, because there's so much to explore. And I'm so extremely happy to see how many people are here to help artists, to advance our art scene and to make it better for the entire community. So thank you for that. And we'll see you again in the art scene. It has been another episode of In the Art Scene podcast. If you liked today's conversation, please give us a good review on Apple and go listen to other great stories. Check out our website intheartscene.com or follow us on Instagram at InTheArtScene for more content. If you are a creative and you want to share your story, shoot us a message from the website or DM us on Instagram. Look forward to seeing you next time in the art scene.